It's been nearly 3 months since a spike in overnight lending rates in mid-September caused a case of repo madness on Wall Street.
All of this excitement about what's going on in the repo market, what's going on with short-term funding.
Here's BMO. What on earth is going on in repo markets as the New York Fed now says they'll have a repurchase operation in order to help maintain the federal funds rate?
When the inner plumbing seizes up is when you worry.
You see this big spike up toward 10%. 10% for secured overnight money. Obviously something was wrong. There was a technical clog in the system.
Wholesale funding market liquidity is really something that did rear its head during the financial crisis.
We need to look at the deeper question. Why is this system suddenly turned out to be not resilient?
I love it. Only here on CNBC will you get an epic montage about the repo rate. Now, after 3 months, are regulators any closer to understanding what caused that chaos? Steve Leisman joins us with an update. Hey, Steve.
Hey, Wolf. Yeah, we now know the Financial Stability Oversight Council is investigating this worrisome blowout in overnight rates of September that you just saw. Today, Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin said in testimony before Congress that one area of inquiry is possible over-regulation. He said, quote, "We're working with the bank regulators on what could have been regulatory issues that caused the spike during the day without creating anything that provides longer financial risks." In one of the most harrowing moments of the financial system, that was since the financial crisis, overnight repo rate spiked in September to nearly 7%, some said even 10%, compared with a normal rate of around 2%, where the Fed funds rate is supposed to be. Now, at the time, the Fed thought banks had plenty of cash, and it remains a mystery why they didn't lend. One suspect, whether government rules require banks to hold too much cash in reserves, and if they loosen those regulations, could they avoid another round of repo madness, Wolf?
Steve, if you had to blame one person more than the other, would it be the Treasury, would it be the New York Fed, or would it be the Fed itself?
I think the Fed did a good faith effort to estimate the amount of reserves required into the system. I think nobody's ever been here before with a big $4 trillion balance sheet they tried to winnow down. If I blame anybody, I think it's the overall Federal Reserve System for not listening to industry. And I think, Wilf, you know as well as I do, the banks that were talking to the Fed and saying, you know what, we have a problem here. And I think it took the Fed a little bit of time to hear industry talking about that problem. And I think they may have finally opened up their ears and their minds to the problem here.
Although I agree with you, Steve, but you could also forgive the Fed for not thinking, oh, we're going to take all of the profit-making banks at their word on this at the first instance. And maybe there could have been somewhere halfway in between, but I totally get your point.
One of these days, Wolf, we'll have a discussion in depth about this, but I put the blame actually on a survey the Fed does in which they relied upon to set policy, and I think that survey was flawed. So I think the amount of reserves they thought the system needed was incorrect, and I think they found out it was plus or minus $500 billion in the wrong way.
Steve, when we have that discussion, it will go into the next epic montage. Steve Leisman, thank you.
Who sexes up repo like closing bell? Nobody.